October 1942. Above the Solomon Islands, a lone Wildcat circles at 8,000 feet. The pilot scans the horizon through salt-crusted goggles. Below, the Pacific stretches endless and empty. Above, scattered clouds drift in formations that mean nothing. Then the radio crackles. Bandits inbound. 7 contacts. High and diving. The pilot checks his fuel gauge, checks his ammunition counters, checks the sky one more time and sees them. 7 zeros dropping from 12,000 feet like stones thrown at glass. The math is simple and brutal. 7 against 1. Speed advantage to the enemy. Altitude advantage to the enemy. Maneuverability advantage to the enemy. Every doctrine manual, every training briefing, every combat report says the same thing. Run, dive for the deck, use gravity to build speed, brake for friendly airspace, hope they do not chase. Hope you are fast enough. But this pilot does not dive, he does not run, he pulls back the throttle. The Wildcat slows. The engine note drops from a roar to a growl, the airspeed indicator winds down. 220 knots, 200, 180. The aircraft shudders. The controls soften. The stall warning begins its metallic rattle. And the Zeros commit to their attack. They come in a coordinated slash, staggered in altitude, each fighter assigned a firing window. Standard doctrine, proven tactics. They have done this 100 times over China, over the Philippines, over every scrap of contested sky in the Pacific. They expect the Wildcat to dive. They expect evasion. They expect fear. What they do not expect is for the target to slow down. The lead Zero dives through 4,000 feet. Airspeed builds to 350 knots. The pilot lines up the deflection angle, finger on the trigger, waiting for range. 300 yards? 250, 200. He fires. Tracers arc forward. Then he realizes the geometry is wrong. The Wildcat is not where it should be. It is too slow. The closure rate is too high. The Zero flashes past, overshooting by 50 yards, unable to adjust, unable to pull lead, momentum carrying it through the intercept point with nothing to show but wasted ammunition and confusion. The second Zero attacks from a different angle, same result. The third tries a beam run, same problem. The Wildcat stays slow, turns tight, and refuses to cooperate. The pilot holds the aircraft at the edge of a stall, bleeding speed deliberately, forcing every attacker to overshoot or pull off. It is the opposite of every rule. It violates every instinct. It should not work. But the Zeros scatter. They climb. They regroup. And over the radio, intercepted weeks later by American intelligence listening posts, a Japanese flight leader transmits 4 words that will echo through tactical analysis for decades. He is too slow. We are overshooting. The impossible has just become doctrine. The Pacific Air War in 1942 is not a fair fight. It is a systematic slaughter dressed in the language of strategy. American pilots climb into their cockpits knowing the numbers, knowing the physics, knowing that the aircraft they fly is slower, less agile, and outclassed in almost every measurable category by the enemy they face. The Mitsubishi A6M0 is a masterpiece of engineering compromise. It sacrifices armor for weight. It sacrifices fuel tank protection for range. It sacrifices pilot safety for performance. The result is an aircraft that climbs faster, turns tighter, and dominates the vertical fight with brutal efficiency. Japanese pilots are trained from adolescence. They accumulate thousands of hours before they see combat. They fly with discipline, precision, and an institutional knowledge built over years of war in China. They do not make mistakes. They do not panic. They exploit every advantage their aircraft provides. The Grumman F-4F Wildcat is the opposite philosophy made manifest. It is heavy, armored, and built to absorb punishment. It has self-sealing fuel tanks. It has pilot armor plating. It has ruggedness that keeps men alive when they should be dead. But it is slow. Its climb rate is poor. Its turn radius is wide. In a dogfight against a Zero, the Wildcat loses on paper before the first shot is fired. American doctrine acknowledges this reality. Fighter tactics are built around the Wildcat's limitations. Maintain speed, use diving attacks, never turn with a zero, never try to climb with a zero, disengage if outnumbered, run if you can. These rules are not suggestions. They are survival protocols written in blood and refined through bitter experience. Pilots who follow them sometimes live. Pilots who deviate almost always die. The loss rates tell the story. In the first 6 months after Pearl Harbor, American fighters are shot down at ratios that approach 4-to-1 in some theaters. Entire squadrons are cycled through replacement pilots every 8 weeks. Men arrive fresh from stateside, training, fly a handful of missions, and disappear. The Pacific becomes a graveyard for young men who believed bravery could compensate for physics. Ground crews work in silence. They patch bullet holes. They replace shattered canopies. They scrub blood from cockpits and do not speak of whose blood it was. Mechanics develop rituals. Some refuse to service an aircraft that has lost 2 pilots. Others paint small symbols on engine cowlings, prayers rendered in grease pencil and desperation. Everyone knows the statistics. Everyone pretends they do not matter. Squadron commanders send reports up the chain. They request better aircraft. They request more training time. They request tactics that might level the field. The replies are sympathetic and vague. Resources are stretched. Production is ramping up. New fighters are coming. Hold the line. Make do. Survive. And so pilots climb into their Wildcats each morning knowing they are flying inferior machines into superior odds. They follow doctrine because doctrine is all they have. They maintain speed, they avoid turning engagements, they disengage when possible, and they die anyway. Because the zero is faster. Because the enemy dictates the terms. Because no one has found a way to turn disadvantage into advantage. No one has asked the right question. Until a crop duster from Nebraska starts sketching diagrams in a notebook and wondering if everyone has been thinking about speed completely wrong. Leland Garrett does not look like a warrior. He is tall and thin with wire-rimmed glasses that fog in the humidity. His hands are calloused from years of farm work, not from gun triggers or control sticks. He speaks slowly, choosing words the way a carpenter chooses nails, each one tested for fit before deployment. His squadron mates call him the professor behind his back. Some call him the scarecrow. A few call him the calculator. None of them call him a natural. Garrett was born in 1918 in rural Nebraska, the second son of a wheat farmer who lost everything in the Dust Bowl and rebuilt through sheer stubbornness. The family farm was small, marginal, and required constant improvisation to survive. Leland learned early that resources were finite and mistakes were expensive. He learned to fix machinery with improvised parts. He learned to read weather patterns and soil conditions. He learned that nature followed rules, and if you understood the rules, you could work within them instead of against them. He started flying crop dusters at 16, working for a local outfit that sprayed fields for $1 an acre. The planes were ancient, patched together from salvaged parts and optimism. Leland flew them low and slow, skimming wheat fields at dawn, learning the margins where control ended and physics took over. He developed an intuitive sense for weight, drag, and the invisible forces that kept an aircraft aloft. He did not think of it as science. He thought of it as conversation. The plane told you what it could do. You listened. You did not argue. When war came, Garrett enlisted in the Army Air Forces. He passed flight training without distinction. Instructors noted his technical aptitude but questioned his aggression. One evaluation described him as hesitant under simulated combat stress. Another flagged him for overanalysis. He was competent, reliable, and entirely lacking the killer instinct that made great fighter pilots. He was assigned to a Marine fighter squadron in the Pacific, shuffled through 3 units in 6 months, and treated as a spare part that no one quite knew how to use. He did not fit the culture. Fighter pilots were supposed to be bold, instinctive, and competitive. They told war stories in the mess tent. They kept score. They drank hard and flew harder. Garrett did none of these things. After missions, he disappeared to his tent with a notebook and a mechanical pencil. He sketched the geometry of engagements from memory, drawing arcs and vectors, estimating speeds and angles. He was trying to understand something that eluded most pilots: the pure physics of aerial combat. He read everything he could find: technical manuals on aerodynamics, Japanese fighter doctrine translated by intelligence officers, after-action reports from pilots who survived encounters with Zeros. He asked questions that irritated his commanding officers, questions like, why do we always fight on their terms? What if we stop trying to outrun them? What if speed is not the answer? His squadron leader told him to focus on fundamentals. Doctrine existed for a reason. Pilots who freelanced died. The discussion ended there. But Garrett kept thinking. He could not shake a growing conviction that everyone was missing something fundamental. The Zero was faster, but speed created vulnerabilities. Momentum was an asset in attack, but a liability in adjustment. If you could disrupt the enemy's speed advantage, if you could force them into a situation where their velocity worked against them, you might survive. The problem was that slowing down in combat felt like suicide. Every instinct screamed against it, but instinct was not physics, and Garrett trusted physics more than fear. The tactical problem facing American fighter pilots in the Pacific is not new. It has existed since the first engagements over China in 1937. Japanese fighters are lighter, faster, and more maneuverable than anything the Allies can field. The Zero's performance envelope allows it to dominate dogfights through superior energy management and turn radius. American pilots know this, intelligence officers know this, commanders know this. The solution, according to doctrine, is to avoid dogfights entirely. Use hit-and-run tactics, dive from altitude, fire, and disengage before the enemy can respond. The Thok Weave, developed by Lieutenant Commander John Thok, offers mutual support through coordinated scissoring maneuvers. It works when you have a wingman. It works when you have altitude. It works when the enemy cooperates. But combat rarely offers ideal conditions. Pilots get separated. Formations break apart. Altitude advantage evaporates when Zeros climb from below. And when you are alone, outnumbered, and caught low, doctrine offers one answer: run. The problem is that running does not always work. The Zero can chase, it can pursue, it can follow a diving Wildcat and wait for the American pilot to level out or run out of airspace. Pilots who run sometimes make it home. Sometimes they lead the enemy back to friendly positions. Sometimes they simply die tired. Garrett reads the after-action reports and sees a pattern that others miss. The highest casualty rates occur not during the initial engagement, but during the disengagement. Pilots follow doctrine. They dive. They build speed. They run. And the Zeros follow, sitting in the tail blind spot, firing controlled bursts until something critical fails. The Americans cannot outrun them. They cannot outturn them. They cannot climb away. So they die, according to the rules. Garrett begins to sketch alternative scenarios in his notebook. He draws vectors representing closing speeds. He calculates intercept angles. He maps the geometry of overshoot conditions. The math is simple. If an attacker is traveling at 350 knots and the target is traveling at 150 knots, the closure rate is 200 knots. The attacker has less time to adjust aim. The target appears to move slower through the gun sight, creating deflection errors. If the target suddenly decelerates further, the attacker's firing solution collapses. The enemy flashes past, unable to correct, forced to climb and reposition. During that window, roles reverse. The hunter becomes vulnerable. The hunted gains a firing opportunity. It is textbook physics. It is also insane. Slowing down in combat violates every survival instinct. Pilots are trained to equate speed with life. Throttle settings are pushed forward, not pulled back. The idea of deliberately bleeding airspeed while under attack feels like surrender. Worse, it requires perfect timing. Too early, and the enemy adjusts. Too late, and you absorb cannon fire. The margin for error is non-existent. Garrett proposes the idea to his flight leader during a briefing. The response is immediate and dismissive. Slowing down makes you an easier target. It destabilizes the aircraft. It invites disaster. The idea is filed under dangerous nonsense. Garrett does not argue. He salutes. He leaves. But he does not stop thinking. He knows what the math says. He knows what physics predicts. And he knows that sometime soon he will have no choice but to test whether theory can survive contact with 7 zeros diving out of the sun. October 12, 1942. Dawn breaks over Henderson Field on Guadalcanal. The air smells of aviation fuel, coral dust, and the salt rot of jungle vegetation baking under shade. Equatorial sun. Ground crews move through pre-flight checks in weary silence. Engines cough to life. Propellers churn the thick air. Garrett walks the perimeter of his Wildcat, inspecting control surfaces, checking ammunition feeds, running through the ritual that keeps fear at a manageable distance. His aircraft is older than most, painted in faded sea blue with paint flaking from the engine cowling. It has been repaired so many times that the maintenance log reads like a medical chart for a chronic patient. But the engine runs. The guns function. The radio works. That is enough. The mission briefing is short. Fly north along the coast. Patrol the shipping lanes between Guadalcanal and Santa Isabel. Watch for Japanese float planes staging reconnaissance runs. Engage only if you have advantage. Return before fuel becomes critical. No fighter escort, no backup. Standard procedure for a war being fought with insufficient resources and too many miles of empty ocean. Garrett takes off at 0600 hours. The Wildcat climbs slowly, laboring in the humid air. He levels off at 8,000 feet and turns north. Below, the jungle canopy is unbroken green. The ocean beyond is glassy, calm. The radio is silent except for static. He flies for 30 minutes seeing nothing. Then the radio crackles. Bogies inbound, multiple contacts, high and closing. Garrett scans the sky. He sees them rising from the northwest, 7 dark shapes climbing out of the haze. Zeros. A full section. They are already above him, already positioning for an attack run. He checks his fuel. Enough for 90 minutes. He checks his position. 50 miles from friendly airspace. He checks his options. There are none. Running will not work. They have altitude and speed. They will chase him down. Turning back will only delay the inevitable. He is alone. He is outnumbered. He is exactly where doctrine says you should never be. The zeros spread into attack formation. Garrett can see them coordinating, adjusting their spacing, setting up overlapping firing windows. They have done this before. They are confident. They expect him to dive. They expect him to run. They expect easy prey. Garrett does not dive. He pulls back the throttle. The engine note drops. The airspeed bleeds off 220 knots. 200, 180. The Wildcat begins to shudder. The controls go soft. The stall warning rattles. Every nerve in his body screams to push the throttle forward. Every hour of training demands speed. Every instinct says he is about to die. But the math is clear. If he runs, they catch him. If he fights conventionally, they outturn him. The only variable he can control is closure rate. The only advantage he can create is unpredictability. The lead zero commits. It dives through 6,000 feet, building speed, lining up the shot. Garrett holds his position. He holds his speed. He watches the zero grow larger in his windscreen. 300 yards. 200, 150. He does not flinch. He does not move. And at the last possible second, he pulls. The Wildcat lurches. The nose pitches up. The zero flashes past, overshooting, unable to adjust. Garrett rolls level. 6 zeros remain. The real test has just begun. The second zero attacks before the first has cleared the area. It comes from Garrett's right, angling for a beam shot. Standard tactics. If the target tries to evade left, it flies into the firing line. If it breaks right, it presents a deflection angle. Either way, the zero gets a shooting solution. But Garrett does neither. He reduces throttle again. The Wildcat decelerates. The zero's pilot sees his target slowing and adjusts, pulling more lead, compensating for the reduced closure. But the adjustment is wrong. Garrett is not maintaining a steady deceleration. He is modulating, bleeding speed in bursts, creating unpredictable movement. The zero fires. Tracers arc wide, missing by 20 feet. The fighter pulls up hard, climbing to reposition. Garrett rolls, tracks the climb and fires a short burst. His rounds stitch across the zero's tail section. Fabric tears. The enemy aircraft wobbles but does not fall. It climbs away, trailing smoke. The remaining 5 zeros circle, wary now. They regroup at 10,000 feet, studying the Wildcat below. Garrett holds his altitude, holds his reduced speed. He knows what they are thinking. This should not be happening. A lone Wildcat should be dead by now. They should be reporting the kill and moving on. Instead, they are burning fuel and time. The flight leader signals. They attack again, this time in pairs. One high, one low. Coordinated. Designed to split Garrett's attention. If he watches the high threat, the low threat kills him. If he watches the low threat, the high threat kills him. It is a proven tactic. It works. Garrett watches both. He waits. The high zero dives first. Garrett cuts throttle and drops flaps. The Wildcat's airspeed collapses to 140 knots. The aircraft wallows, skating on the edge of a stall. The high zero overshoots, unable to slow enough to track. The low zero pulls up for a snapshot, but Garrett is already rolling, using the last of his energy to spoil the angle. The zero's burst passes behind him. Both attackers climb away, frustrated. Garrett retracts flaps, adds throttle, regains airspeed. 160 knots, 170, enough to maneuver, not enough to run. He is bleeding them, not shooting them down, not outrunning them, but bleeding their time and patience. Every failed attack costs them fuel. Every repositioning burns minutes. The zeros are coordinated, but coordination requires communication and patience. Frustration is starting to show. A third pair attacks. This time Garrett varies his response. Instead of slowing, he accelerates momentarily, then chops throttle at the critical moment. The sudden change in speed throws off their timing. 1 zero pulls off early. The other presses the attack and overshoots badly. Garrett snaps into a climbing turn, gains a brief firing position, and hammers a full burst into the zero's engine. Smoke pours black. The zero rolls inverted and dives, trailing flames. It does not pull out. The engagement has lasted 8 minutes. 2 zeros are damaged or destroyed. 4 remain. But Garrett's fuel is dropping. His ammunition is half gone. His engine is running hot. He cannot sustain this indefinitely. The zeros know it. They regroup again. They adjust their tactics. And Garrett realizes he has to stop defending and start trapping. The remaining 4 zeros circle at 9,000 feet. Garrett circles below them at 7,000. It is a stalemate, but stalemates favor the side with more aircraft and more fuel. The Japanese flight leader knows this. Garrett knows this. Time is not neutral. It is the enemy's ally. Garrett stops thinking about defense. He starts thinking about geometry. The zeros are circling clockwise, maintaining spacing, waiting for an opening. They are disciplined. They are not rushing. But their discipline creates predictability. They stay high. They stay outside gun range. They coordinate their attacks from the same altitude band, which means they are thinking in 2 dimensions when the fight exists in 3. Garrett climbs, not aggressively, but steadily. He adds power, noses up, and gains altitude at a rate that looks like fatigue, like an aircraft struggling to maintain height. The Zeros watch. They see a wounded opponent. They see opportunity. They descend slightly, closing the vertical gap, preparing for another coordinated run. Garrett continues climbing. He passes through 8,000 feet, 8,500. The Zeros drop to 8,000 to maintain their advantage. They are now in a tighter vertical stack, compressed by their own aggression. Garrett levels off at 8,500 feet. He is now in the middle of their formation, not below them, not fleeing, inside their decision space. The Zeros react with confusion. Doctrine does not cover this. The enemy is supposed to run or die. It is not supposed to climb into the center of the trap. The flight leader signals an attack. 2 Zeros dive from above. Garrett throttles back, forces the overshoot, but this time he does not recover to level flight. He pulls into a climbing turn, angling toward the other 2 Zeros who are holding position. They break, one left, one right. Standard evasion, but now they are separating. The formation is fracturing. Garrett reverses, rolls, and drops back to 7,500 feet. The 2 Zeros who dove are climbing back up. The 2 who broke are repositioning. All 4 are now spread across 1,000 feet of altitude and a mile of horizontal space. They are no longer a coordinated unit. They are individuals reacting to a target that refuses to behave. Garrett exploits the chaos. He angles toward the nearest Zero, the one climbing back. From the overshoot, the Zero sees him coming and tries to turn, but it is slow, still bleeding energy from the dive and climb cycle. Garrett closes to 200 yards. He fires. The burst is short and precise. Rounds hammer into the Zero's wing root. The wing folds. The aircraft spins, shedding pieces. It does not recover. 3 Zeros remain. They are scattered, burning fuel, and visibly hesitant. The flight leader makes the decision. He signals withdrawal. The Zeros form up, turn east, and accelerate away. Garrett does not pursue. He has no fuel for a chase. He has proven what he needed to prove. Not that he could kill them all, but that he could survive them all. That speed was not the only answer. That physics, properly applied, could turn a death sentence into a stalemate. He turns south. His hands are shaking. His mouth is dry. His fuel gauge reads critical. But he is alive. And 7 Zeros no longer own the sky. Garrett lands at Henderson Field 40 minutes later with fuel, fumes, and adrenaline. The Wildcat rolls to a stop. The engine coughs once and dies. Ground crew sprint toward the aircraft, expecting carnage. They find bullet holes in the tail section, gouges along the fuselage, and a pilot who climbs out without assistance. The crew chief circles the plane, counting damage, shaking his head. He asks Garrett what happened. Garrett says he encountered Zeros. The crew chief asks how many. Garrett says 7. The crew chief stops counting holes. He stares. He does not believe it. Nobody survives 7 Zeros alone. Garrett files his combat report in the operations tent. He describes the engagement in clinical detail. 7 enemy fighters. Initial bounce from altitude. Deliberate speed reduction to force overshoots. Multiple attacks repelled through throttle management and unpredictable maneuvering. 2 Zeros damaged or destroyed. Remaining aircraft disengaged after 12 minutes. He does not embellish. He does not claim heroism. He describes physics. His squadron leader reads the report with a deepening frown. He calls Garrett in for debriefing. He asks Garrett to explain the throttle reduction tactic. Garrett tries. He talks about closure rates, about overshoot mechanics, about energy management. The squadron leader listens with visible irritation. He tells Garrett he got lucky. He tells him the maneuver is reckless and suicidal. He tells him not to try it again. Doctrine exists for a reason. Pilots who freelance die. Garrett says nothing. He salutes and leaves. But one intelligence officer at Henderson Field takes note. Captain Raymond Stokes has been tracking combat patterns for 6 months. He notices anomalies. He reads every after-action report. He catalogs tactics. When he reads Garrett's report, something clicks. 3 days earlier, radio intercept operators picked up Japanese transmissions during an engagement near Santa Isabel. The transmissions were fragmented, partially garbled, but clear enough. Enemy pilots reporting. Defensive tactics that disrupted coordinated attacks. Specific mention of an American fighter that behaved unpredictably. Specific mention of overshooting. Specific mention of wasted ammunition on a target that refused standard engagement geometry. Stokes cross-references the timestamps. The intercepts align with Garrett's patrol window. He requests the original Japanese voice recordings. Translators work through the static and combat chatter. One phrase repeats, "He is too slow. We are overshooting." Stokes writes a classified memo. He sends it up the intelligence chain. He does not recommend formal adoption of Garrett's tactic. He simply notes that enemy pilots encountered something unexpected, and that the unexpected created measurable disruption. The memo circulates quietly. Tactical officers read it. Some dismiss it as anecdotal. Others file it away as interesting but unactionable. A few begin asking questions, asking pilots if anyone else has tried slowing down under attack, asking engineers about Wildcat stall characteristics, asking whether there might be something worth exploring in the margins where doctrine ends and improvisation begins. Word spreads slowly, not through official channels, but through the invisible network of pilots talking over drinks and ground crew swapping stories. The man who fought 7 zeros and lived becomes a quiet legend. Some call it luck. Some call it suicide. A few call it genius. Garrett calls it physics and goes back to flying. Garrett flies 16 more missions over the next 6 weeks. He encounters zeros 4 more times. Each engagement follows the same pattern. He uses throttle manipulation to disrupt attack geometry. He forces overshoots. He survives. Other pilots begin to watch him closely. They notice how he briefs missions, how he talks about energy states and closure rates, how he approaches combat like an engineering problem. A handful of pilots ask him to explain the throttle tactic. Garrett does. He sketches diagrams on scrap paper. He demonstrates with hand movements. He emphasizes timing. Too early, and the enemy adjusts. Too late, and you die. The window is narrow. The execution requires nerve and precise aircraft control. Some pilots nod politely and never try it. A few take notes. Lieutenant Marcus Webb tries it first. He is 23, a former mechanic from Ohio who understands machines better than tactics. During a patrol near Munda, 2 zeros bounce him from altitude. He remembers Garrett's briefing. He pulls back throttle at the moment of attack. The first zero overshoots. Webb survives. He does not get a kill. He does not win the engagement. But he lives when doctrine said he should die. He lands shaking and exhilarated. He tells other pilots. The story spreads. Captain Daniel Chen tries the tactic 2 weeks later during an engagement over Rendova. He is outnumbered 3-1. He uses throttle reduction combined with vertical maneuvering. He forces 2 overshoots and damages. 1-0 before disengaging. He makes it home. Other pilots take note. By December 1942, 6 pilots in Garrett's squadron have experimented with throttle manipulation under combat conditions. 4 survive encounters they would have lost using conventional tactics. 2 die, but post-mission analysis suggests they mistimed the maneuver, pulling throttle too early or failing to recover airspeed quickly enough. The tactic is not foolproof. It is not a magic solution, but it is an option, a tool, something to try when doctrine offers nothing but flight and prayer. Flight instructors hear about it. Some dismiss it as desperation. Others begin incorporating elements into advanced training, not as formal doctrine, but as situational awareness. Teaching pilots to recognize overshoot conditions. Teaching them that speed is not always survival. teaching them to think about energy management in 3 dimensions instead of 2. The Japanese notice. Captured Zero pilots interrogated in. Early 1943 mention American fighters that behave erratically, targets that decelerate unexpectedly, attacks that fail due to closure rate miscalculations. One pilot describes it as fighting a drunken opponent, unpredictable and dangerous despite technical inferiority. Intelligence officers note the comments. Tactical analysts add them to growing files on American defensive innovations. The Zero remains superior in performance, but psychological advantage begins to erode. American pilots stop seeing every engagement as unwinnable. They start believing they have options. Morale shifts, not dramatically, not universally, but measurably. Pilots fly more aggressively knowing they have a counter when things go wrong. Survival rates improve incrementally. Loss ratios narrow. The math is subtle but real. In a war of attrition, small percentages compound into hundreds of lives. Garrett never seeks credit. He flies his missions. He teaches anyone who asks. He survives 67 combat sorties and returns stateside in March 1943 with 9 confirmed kills and a reputation as the pilot who made slowness lethal. Leland Garrett musters out of the Marine Corps in November 1945. He returns to Nebraska. He buys a small farm outside Grand Island. He marries a schoolteacher named Catherine. They have 3 children. He works the land. He fixes machinery. He flies crop dusters again, the same slow, dangerous work he did before the war. He does not talk about the Pacific unless asked, and even then his answers are brief. He does not attend reunions. He does not give interviews. He does not write memoirs. The war is something that happened. It does not define him. When reporters track him down in the 1960s asking about the throttle tactic, he shrugs and says he was just trying not to die. He does not claim to have invented anything. He does not claim genius. He saw a problem and applied physics. The fact that it worked was partly skill and partly luck. Mostly luck, he insists, but the pilots who flew with him remember differently. They remember a man who thought clearly under fire, who questioned doctrine when doctrine was failing, who trusted mathematics more than instinct. They tell stories. Some are exaggerated, most are true. The story of 7 Zeros and 1 Wildcat becomes legend in Marine aviation circles. Historians researching Pacific air combat find his after-action reports buried in archives. They find intelligence memos mentioning throttle manipulation tactics. They find Japanese radio intercepts describing American fighters that disrupted attacks through unpredictable speed changes. They piece together a narrative that Garrett himself never bothered to tell. Modern fighter pilot training includes energy management as a core component. Instructors teach overshoot mechanics. They teach throttle control during defensive maneuvering. They teach that speed is a variable, not a constant. The language has changed. The principles remain. Garrett's insight that slower can be deadlier when applied with precision survives in every air combat syllabus. His name is mostly absent. The tactic exists without attribution, absorbed into the collective knowledge of how to fight and survive in 3-dimensional space. Aviation historians occasionally mention him in footnotes. A few books credit him with pioneering defensive throttle techniques in the Pacific theater. Most accounts focus on technology, on the Wildcat versus the Zero, on kill ratios and strategic outcomes. The individual mind that saw past doctrine to underlying physics is forgotten. Garrett dies in 1989 at the age of 71. His obituary in the Grand Island newspaper mentions his service. It mentions 9 aerial victories. It does not mention the tactic. It does not mention the 7 Zeros. His family buries him in a small cemetery outside town. A handful of aging veterans attend. They do not speak of tactics or doctrine. They speak of a man who gave them a chance when doctrine said there was none, Who proved that intellect could outmaneuver instinct? Who showed them that survival sometimes required doing the opposite of what felt safe? The man is gone. The lesson endures. That in war, as in physics, the most powerful force is not the one that moves fastest, but the one that moves smartest.